willsurvivetv.com.
Welcome back to the project. Now, Hamish, you've got a project exclusive for us tonight.
I do, that's right, Carrie. Tonight we bring you the story of a young Indonesian boy who's imprisoned in an Australian adult prison for people smuggling. Now, we believe that he's a child and shouldn't be there at all. And just to note, there's a whistleblower in this story, and to protect his identity, we've had to significantly alter his voice.
This remote chain of islands in the Flores Sea is the beautiful setting for an ugly story about a country's treatment of one young boy. Indonesia has an appalling human rights record, particularly when it comes to children. But this is a story about what Australia has done.
I cannot get my head around that this is what we're doing. It is repulsive. It's an obscenity.
At play are high-stakes politics, international diplomacy, human rights standards, and basic justice. And tonight, fresh, damning evidence that Australia got it wrong, and dramatic revelations from an insider speaking for the first time.
Someone says to you one day, do you know there's a bunch of young children being held in a maximum security prison in Perth? And you think, no, not possible.
The story of Ali Yasmin, known simply as Yasmin, begins here in this timeless volcanic archipelago. In late 2009, the young Indonesian left to work as a cook on a boat smuggling asylum seekers to Australia. It got into trouble and the passengers and crew were picked up by the Australian Navy. After facing court, he's now serving a 5-year mandatory sentence in Albany's maximum security adult prison. We believe he's under the age of 18 and shouldn't be there at all. So we've come looking for evidence. This is not the easiest place to get to. From Flores, it's a long and difficult journey to Yasmin's home village of Balaurang. And perhaps in part, that's why no one has ever bothered to come looking for the truth.
Selamat pagi. Pagi, saya Hamish, saya journalist dari Australia.
His family is surprised to see us. We're the first people to arrive seeking information on Yasmin since he left 2.5 years ago.
Anaknya baik, penyayang. Saya ingat dulu, dia yang selalu bantu saya, kasih anak-anak saya uang belanja begitu. Padahal dia adik saya. Dulu sama saya pernah itu.
His mother shows us the pictures he sent her from prison a few months back. Yasmin's been able to call and write from behind bars, but his mother says until now no one has come from Australia asking her how old her son is. In a country where birth dates are rarely considered important, she is adamant he is still a child. But in Australia, the courts require hard evidence, the kind you might find in a school. Al-Hikam Sekolah is where Yasmin studied. The boys in this class are 12, about the same age Yasmin's mum says he was when he left. So we've asked the headmaster if there are any records.
It says Balaurang, which is this village, 12th of October 1996. So that would make him today 15. He'll be 16 in October of this year. What's difficult to believe is that to date, nobody from Australia has bothered to come here and find this out.
These records are a significant discovery. They're independent and consistent with what Yasmin's family claims. The Kepala Desa, or village chief, verifies the accuracy of what we've found under Indonesian law. But things are about to get a lot more interesting.
Well, one of Yasmin Ali's relatives has just turned up from the main town in the district with this folder of documents. And in it is the family's registration papers, including Yasmin Ali's birth date. As well as that, believe it or not, there is a birth certificate. But what's really intriguing is this receipt stapled to the top from when the family faxed this document to a number in Perth on the 23rd of August 2010, which is when he was in court. The number, I've searched, and it belongs to the Indonesian consulate in Perth. Now that raises some really big questions.
The birth certificate was generated in 2010 after Ali Yasmin was arrested, but we've seen no public record of it so far in Australia. David McKenzie was Ali Yasmin's defence lawyer. I questioned him over the phone from Sydney.
Were you aware ever of there being a birth certificate at the Indonesian consulate?
At the consulate? Well, I was aware of a birth
certificate having been obtained.
Right. So I'm not clear on why that, if that was obtained, why that wasn't presented in the court.
Stop there for a minute, Hamish. There are certain rules of evidence, Hamish, about matters and how documents are presented, and somebody has to speak to the document and say how it was obtained, whether this is a reliable document, and they're just, in this case, there wasn't any way of getting this birth certificate into evidence.
Right.
Other than his verbal testimony, Yasmin's defence lawyers presented no contrary evidence when the federal government put forward a wrist bone density X-ray.
Remember, it wasn't, the information about his birth date wasn't recorded at his birth. It's being obtained years later. And so any information is probably going to be quite unreliable.
A former Indonesian consular official has confirmed to us that they were approached about supporting the document in court, only later to be told by David McKenzie that was not required. He believes to this day that the birth certificate would not have been admissible as evidence. At the time, where no formal record existed, a wrist X-ray was used to determine age in Australia. But that process was faulty. Late last year, the federal government introduced new measures to produce more accurate results. That was too late for Yasmin.
Well, look, I take instructions from a client, and so I'd taken instructions on that, and he entered the plea that he thought was the correct one.
Yeah. Was it your personal view in that circumstance that he was an adult, or did you doubt that he was?
Well, from the start, I thought that he was a child because he looked to be one.
By now, we have 4 separate records of Ali Yasmin's birth date. 2 of those have him born on the 12th of January. The other 2 say the 12th of October. That's a discrepancy of 10 months, or possibly just 2 digits. All documents point to one thing. He was born in 1996. At most, he is 16 today. He would have been only 14 when Australian courts convicted him as an adult and locked him up in one of Western Australia's toughest prisons. In a letter obtained by the project, written on behalf of the then Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd in November last year, where there is any uncertainty about age, people smuggling crew are given the benefit of the doubt and returned home to Indonesia. But evidently, not in this case. If you need more convincing, try this. The words of an insider working firsthand in Western Australia's prisons.
I first came across Yasmin probably April 2010. I thought he was very young indeed. He was prepubescent, skin very fair, no hair. The mannerisms really very much of a frightened young child.
This whistleblower says everyone in the prison system knew from early on.
After seeing it and speaking to everyone else, everyone was of the same opinion. And people are of the same opinion to this day, 2 years later. I want Yasmin home with his family.
Back on the island, they still send young men off to sea every day, but they hope these ones will come back. The disappearance of Ali Yasmin has rocked this community, so reflect just for one moment on how you'd feel, how we'd react if this were an Australian child in an Indonesian prison.
I just have to think about Bali Boy. You know, straight away that comes to mind, how involved they got in making sure, you know, but yet they'll let something like this happen.
Yeah, in cases like that, the Australian diplomatic service brings its full force to bear on the Indonesian authorities to get it dealt with speedily and effectively. In this case, that obviously hasn't happened, even though in his first meeting as Foreign Minister, Bob Carr met with the Indonesian Foreign Minister and they said that this was a priority and they wanted to deal with it and make sure there were no children behind bars in adult prisons. He's still there tonight. He shouldn't be.
This isn't about where you stand on asylum seekers, where you stand on people smugglers. The simple fact is you don't put children in adult maximum security prisons, and the test was faulty.
Look, that's right. Last year, the federal government changed the process for determining age because they recognised that the wrist X-rays were faulty. There's a large margin of error, and they were producing faulty results. If this case were in court today, they wouldn't be able to rely purely on the X-ray. The changes weren't retrospective, so it was too late for Yasmin.
That's ridiculous.
The federal government needs to look at the retrospective nature of this and go back to these cases where there are individuals there just on the wrist X-ray.
But you've gone to a lot of effort, and other people can't be bothered, obviously.
I don't know why these efforts weren't made earlier on.
Yeah.
There is a lot more to this story.
Some people would say, though, that, you know, if he's 14 or 16, he's, you know, done the wrong thing, and that a message needs to be sent.
Absolutely. There's no question that he did the wrong thing. It's worth noting that he was the cook. The court found that he had no involvement in planning what happened.
He's still the child, though.
But in the eyes of our law, regardless of whether he was the cook or whether he was the ringleader, as a child, under Australian law, your case would be dealt with differently. And that obviously is the core of this issue. I know that there are more people out there that have more information on this story. There is a lot more to unfold. So I just say that if you have more information, if you do want to talk to me off the record or preferably on, you can contact me directly via Twitter at Hamish News.
I'll try and get a comment from the government tomorrow as well.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute.
Next on 10, new Biggest Loser.
New Offspring returns 8:30 Wednesday on 10.
Amy, say